Every crime is a wound on the world. We're here to dissect it, layer by layer, to find the truth buried within. This is Anatomy of Crime. There is a specific sound that defines the modern search for connection. It is a short, sharp digital tone, a notification that signals possibility. In the early 21st century, we migrated our courtship rituals from the village square and the local bar to the illuminated screen of the smartphone. We entrusted our hearts to algorithms. We learned to judge character by a bio, a curated gallery of photos, and the erratic rhythm of text messages. We accepted that the person on the other end of the line was who they claimed to be, because the alternative, that we were interacting with a ghost or worse, a predator, was too cynical to bear. Tonight we are not just talking about a con artist. We are dissecting a man who understood the architecture of modern desire better than perhaps anyone else in the criminal underworld. He did not break into vaults with thermal drills or dynamite. He did not hold up banks with a mask and a shotgun. He bypassed the security systems of logic and caution by hacking the human need for intimacy. He built a reality so glittering, so seamless, and so intoxicating that his victims thanked him even as he was destroying their lives. This is the story of Shimon Hayat, better known to the world as Simon Leviev. To the women who loved him, he was the Prince of Diamonds, the heir to a billionaire's empire, a man constantly under threat from mysterious enemies. But to the forensic psychologist and the financial investigator, he represents something far more clinical. He is the architect of a Ponzi scheme where the currency was not stocks or bonds, but affection. Welcome to Anatomy of Crime. Today, we dissect the anatomy of a modern romance scam. We will peel back the layers of the Tinder swindler case to understand the precise psychological levers used to extract millions of dollars from victims across Europe. We will look at the grooming process, the inducement of crisis, and the terrifying efficiency of coercive control in the digital age. This is not just a story about bad dates. It is a story about how our perception of reality can be warped, twisted, and ultimately sold back to us at a price we cannot afford to pay. To understand the anatomy of this crime, we must first understand the canvas upon which it was painted. The year is 2018. The setting is the borderless digital playground of the European elite. London, Amsterdam, Oslo, Stockholm. These are cities where wealth is not just possessed, it is performed. And on the dating app Tinder, that performance is the primary metric of value. Simon Leviev's profile was a masterclass in aspirational marketing. The photos were not merely selfies, they were tableaus of a life lived at maximum velocity. There were shots of him in business meetings, wearing bespoke suits that cost more than most people's cars. There were images of him on private jets, the leather seats cream-colored, a platter of sushi in the foreground. There were pictures of him driving Ferraris, skiing in the Alps, and relaxing on yachts in the Mediterranean. But the genius of the profile was not just the wealth, it was the context. He wasn't just a rich playboy. He presented himself as a hard-working heir. He claimed to be the CEO of LLD Diamonds, the son of Lev Leviev, a real-life Russian-Israeli billionaire known as the King of Diamonds. This was the first and perhaps most crucial anatomical component of the scam, the borrowed credibility. By anchoring his lie to a verifiable public figure, Simon Leviev created a shield against skepticism. If a woman Googled Lev Leviev, she would find pages of articles about his diamond empire, his wealth, and his power. It made the fantasy plausible. It allowed Simon to inhabit a persona that was already written, stealing the weight and history of a family he had no relation to. Let us examine the case of Cecilie Fjellhøy to see how this mechanism engaged in real time. Cecilie was a 29-year-old Norwegian master's student living in London. She was intelligent, sophisticated, and deeply romantic. She was looking for the kind of love story that Disney movies promise but rarely deliver. When she matched with Simon, the response was immediate. This is the second component of the anatomy, the velocity of intimacy. Most human relationships burn slowly. We test the waters. We wait a few days to text back. We reveal our vulnerabilities over months or years. Simon Leviev short-circuited this evolutionary caution. Within minutes of matching, he asked to meet, not next week but now. He invited her for coffee at the Four Seasons in London, a venue that reinforced his narrative of high-status legitimacy. When Cecilie arrived, she found a man who was charming, attentive, and seemingly open. He wasn't arrogant. He was soft-spoken. He talked about the burden of his responsibilities, the danger of the diamond industry, and his desire for something real. He made her feel that, despite his billions, he was the lonely one, and she was the prize. Then came the escalation. In the middle of their coffee, he casually mentioned he had to fly to Bulgaria for a business meeting, and he asked her to come with him, on a private jet. Pause for a moment and consider the psychological impact of this offer. To a normal person, getting on a plane with a stranger is a red flag, but Simon had already established the context of extreme wealth. In his world, private jets were like taxis. If she refused, she was rejecting the fairy tale. If she accepted, she was stepping into the movie. Cecilie accepted. The trip to Sofia was the hook. It was an immersive theater production designed for an audience of one. She met his team. There was Peter, the hulking bodyguard. There was Avishai, the business partner. There was even his ex-partner and their child, who traveled with him. This is a technique known as social proofing. By surrounding himself with a cast of supporting characters who treated him as the boss, who deferred to him, and who seemed to rely on him, he validated his own lie. If he were a con man, surely the mother of his child wouldn't be there. Surely these professional staff members wouldn't be on the payroll. The reality, of course, was that they were all part of the ecosystem. Knowingly or unknowingly, they were props in the grand stage play. During that trip, and in the weeks that followed, Simon deployed the most potent weapon in the romance scammer's arsenal: love bombing. This is not just about being nice. It is a calculated saturation of affection and attention designed to overwhelm the victim's critical thinking faculties. He sent her enormous bouquets of roses. He texted her constantly. He sent voice notes, videos, and updates on his every movement. "I miss you. I love you. You are the one." He spoke of moving in together. He looked at apartments in London with rental prices of £15,000 a month. He created a future. Psychologically, this creates a dopamine dependency. The victim becomes addicted to the constant validation. The phone becomes a source of unyielding positivity. The brain begins to rewire itself to expect this level of intensity. Cecilie felt like she had won the lottery. She was in love with a prince, and miraculously, the prince was in love with her. But in the anatomy of a scam, the build-up is merely the preparation for the extraction. The extraction requires a crisis. You cannot simply ask a woman you've just met for $50,000. You must make her believe that giving you the money is her idea, or at the very least, a matter of life and death. About a month into the relationship, the tone of the messages changed. The photos of luxury were replaced by photos of violence. Simon sent Cecilie a picture of Peter, the bodyguard, in the back of an ambulance. Peter's head was bleeding. His shirt was soaked in crimson. Simon's voice notes became panicked. He whispered into the phone that his enemies had found him. The diamond trade was dangerous, he reminded her. There were competitors, mafias, people who wanted to stop him from closing the big deal. He told her that security had advised him that he could not use his own credit cards. The enemies could track his location through his transactions. If he swiped his Amex, they would find him, and they would kill him. This is the pivot point. This is where the romance scam transforms into a coercion crime. He induced a state of high adrenaline fear in Cecily. She wasn't just his girlfriend anymore. She was his lifeline. By framing the request as a security measure, he bypassed her financial caution. He wasn't asking for money to buy a car. He was asking for help to stay alive. He asked her to open a credit card in her name for him to use. He asked her to take out cash loans and transfer them to him. He promised with absolute conviction that he would pay her back immediately. He was a billionaire, after all. $50,000 was pocket change to him. He just needed a bridge to get over the security threat. Cecily, operating under the influence of love and terror, complied. She went to bank after bank. She lied to loan officers, coaching herself with the stories Simon gave her. She maxed out cards. She took out high-interest consumer loans. She handed over the digital keys to her financial future, believing she was saving the man she loved. And here lies the crux of the Ponzi scheme element. Where did the money go? It didn't go into a savings account. It went to fund the lifestyle he was projecting to the next victim. While Cecily was in London, panicked and taking out loans, Simon was using her money to fly Pernilla Sjöholm, a Swedish woman he had met on Tinder, to Amsterdam. He was buying dinner for others. He was fueling the jet. The money from victim A pays for the courtship of victim B. The money from victim B pays for the crisis of victim C. It was a perpetual motion machine of fraud, fueled by the credit scores of young European women. Let us analyze the case of Pernilla Sjöholm to understand the versatility of his approach. Pernilla was not looking for a boyfriend in the same way Cecily was. She was independent, skeptical of the prince narrative. When she met Simon, she didn't feel a romantic spark. A less sophisticated predator might have moved on, but Simon Leviev adapted. If he couldn't hook her with romance, he would hook her with friendship and lifestyle. He friend-zoned her. He told her she was great, but they should just be best friends. This disarmed her completely. Because he wasn't trying to sleep with her, she assumed he wasn't trying to use her. He flew her around. He treated her to the same luxury. He confided in her. He brought her into his inner circle. He created a bond of platonic intimacy that was just as strong as the romantic one. And then, the same script played out. The enemies, the bleeding bodyguard, the blocked credit cards, the plea for help. Pernilla, seeing her best friend in mortal danger, handed over her savings. She gave him everything she had, believing she was helping a billionaire out of a temporary jam. The anatomy of the delay is the next phase. Once the money is handed over, the scammer must keep the victim engaged long enough to maximize the extraction before the inevitable collapse. Simon was a master of the delay. He sent transfer receipts. He showed them screenshots of wire transfers for hundreds of thousands of dollars, paying them back. "Look," he would say, "I sent the money. It's the bank's fault. It's a holiday in Germany. It's being held by compliance." These documents were forgeries, likely created with simple Photoshop tools, but to a desperate victim who needs to believe the money is coming, they are lifelines. This period is psychologically tortuous. The victim is suspended in a state of cognitive dissonance. Deep down, the cracks are forming. They know something is wrong. But to admit it is wrong is to admit that they have lost everything: their money, their love, their dignity. So they cling to the lie, they fight for the lie. They attack the bank tellers who tell them the checks are fake. They defend Simon against their own families. This is the sunk cost fallacy weaponized. The more they invested in him, the harder it became to walk away. Simon knew this. He exploited their hope until the very last second. But every Ponzi scheme has a mathematical limit. You cannot outrun the debt forever. For Cecily Fjellhoy, the collapse came when the American Express fraud department contacted her. The scale of the debt was insurmountable: $250,000, money she did not have. The realization that one has been conned is a specific type of trauma. It is a shattering of the self. Cecily realized that the man she slept with, the man she planned a life with, did not exist. Shimon Hayat was not a billionaire. He was a fugitive from Israel, a man who had been defrauding people since his late teens. He was a ghost. This brings us to the investigative anatomy of the case. The turning point was not the police, who were slow to act across international jurisdictions. The turning point was the press. Cecily, facing bankruptcy and suicidal ideation, made a brave and desperate choice. She contacted Verdens Gang, VG, the largest newspaper in Norway. The investigation led by the VG journalists is a masterpiece of digital forensics. They didn't just listen to her story. They tracked the digital footprints of the ghost. They analyzed the credit card statements. They found the flights. They matched the dates. One of the most chilling moments in their investigation was when they traveled to Israel to find his roots. They went to Bnei Brak, an ultra-Orthodox city near Tel Aviv. They found the humble apartment where Shimon Hayat grew up. They met his mother, a woman who claimed she hadn't seen him in years. The contrast between the dusty, modest street in Bnei Brak and the glittering Instagram feed of the Prince of Diamonds was the visual proof of the anatomy of the lie. The journalists discovered that Shimon had legally changed his name to Simon Leviev to facilitate the con. It was a bureaucratic sleight of hand that allowed him to weaponize the Leviev reputation. They also found that he had been wanted in Israel for theft, forgery, and fraud since 2011. He was a career criminal who had simply scaled up his operations. When VG published the article, The Tinder Swindler, it went viral. It was a digital wanted poster. And this brings us to the final and perhaps most satisfying victim arc, Aileen Charlotte. Aileen was dating Simon when the article dropped. She was a luxury fashion executive living in Amsterdam. She had been with him for months. She had already loaned him vast sums of money, tens of thousands of dollars, under the same enemy's pretext. When she saw the article, the world collapsed, but Aileen did not crumble. She got angry, and she possessed a unique set of skills that Simon had underestimated. She worked in fashion. She knew the value of things. Aileen realized that the only assets Simon actually had were the clothes on his back. The Gucci shirts, the Versace loafers, the limited edition luxury goods he had bought with the other women's money. He was practically homeless, bouncing between hotels, desperate for cash because the article had cut off his supply of new victims. In a brilliant inversion of the scam, Aileen convinced Simon that she was still on his side. She told him the article was fake news. She told him she believed him. And then, she made him an offer. She told him she could help him raise cash by selling his wardrobe. Simon, desperate and narcissistically believing he could still control her, agreed. He packed suitcase after suitcase of designer clothes and gave them to her. Aileen took them back to Amsterdam. She listed them on eBay and other resale sites. she sold his skin piece by piece. And she kept the money. It was a fraction of what he stole, but it was a symbolic victory. She was stripping the prince of his robes. But Aileen went further. She stayed in contact with him, tracking his location. When she learned he was planning to fly to Greece, she tipped off the authorities. She provided the flight number. She provided the name on the fake passport he was using. On June 28, 2019, at Athens International Airport, the police were waiting. Shimon Hayat was arrested. The manhunt was over. However, the legal anatomy of this case leaves a bitter aftertaste. We expect a crime of this magnitude, millions of dollars, dozens of victims, profound psychological abuse, to result in decades of prison time. But financial crime, specifically cross-border fraud, is notoriously difficult to prosecute. He was extradited to Israel, not to face charges for the Tinder scams in Europe, but to face the old charges he had fled from in 2011. He was convicted of theft, fraud, and forgery. He was sentenced to 15 months in prison. 15 months. And he didn't even serve that. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and a program to reduce prison overcrowding, he was released after just 5 months. 5 months for destroying the lives of countless women. 5 months for stealing an estimated $10 million over the course of his career. Today, Shimon Hayat walks free. He lives in Israel. He has a model girlfriend. He charges money for personalized video shoutouts. He claims he is a legitimate businessman, that the Netflix documentary and the VG article were lies. He drives expensive cars. He wears designer clothes. How is this possible? It is possible because the money he stole is gone, hidden in the labyrinth of the black market, or spent on the transient luxury he craves. It is possible because the legal systems of Norway, Sweden, the UK, and Holland have struggled to coordinate a prosecution that sticks. And it is possible because, in the eyes of the law, the women gave him the money. The coercion was psychological, not physical. There was no gun to the head, only a gun to the heart. And our statutes have not yet caught up to the reality of coercive control. As we conclude this dissection, we must address the final anatomical layer, the victim blaming. When this story broke, the comment sections were filled with vitriol. Gold diggers, people wrote. They got what they deserved. How could they be so stupid? This reaction reveals a deep misogyny in how we view romance fraud. We applaud the con man for his audacity, calling him a genius, while we mock the victims for their vulnerability. We forget that these women were not just looking for money, they were looking for love, they were looking for a partner, and they were subjected to a sophisticated military-grade psychological operation designed to break down their defenses. Simon Leviev did not just steal money, he stole their trust in their own judgment. He stole their ability to look at a phone screen and believe what they see. He committed a crime against their reality. The anatomy of the Tinder swindler is not about a bad boyfriend. It is about the industrialization of intimacy. It is about how the digital tools we use to connect, Instagram, WhatsApp, Tinder, can be weaponized to create a hall of mirrors where nothing is real, but the pain is absolute. Simon Leviev exploited the glitch in the human operating system, our desire to believe in the fairy tale. He proved that if you wrap a lie in enough Gucci and capture it in 4K resolution, the world will not only believe it, but they will also pay for the privilege of being part of it. In the end, the most terrifying aspect of this case is not that Simon Leviev exists. It is that the digital ecosystem we have built created the perfect habitat for him to thrive, and even now, as a free man, he continues to feed on the attention we cannot help but give him. This has been Anatomy of Crime, where the truth is never simple, but always worth seeking.